Origins of Cloak. Tyrone Johnson is the dark half of the vigilante duo known as Cloak and Dagger. After a drug-related experiment awakened his powers, he became a living personification of darkness. Cloak is the yin to his partner Dagger's yang. Superheroes of the streets, Cloak and Dagger wage a war against dangerous drugs and drug-related crimes. Tyrone Johnson grew up poor in the slums of South Boston. He was a stutterer, and at age 17 this affliction became more than an embarrassment when he couldn't speak up to save his best friend's life from a policeman's bullet. Overwhelmed with grief and guilt, Tyrone ran away from home. He ended up in New York City, haunting the Manhattan Port Authority bus terminal, desperate for food and searching for someone to rob. Instead, he found Tandy Bowen, another runaway, and ironically, prevented her from being robbed. Their strong friendship started here, with each trying to help the other. The pair were homeless, and despite Tyrone's reservations, they were lured to the laboratory of Simon Marshall. He was a chemist working for the Mafia, attempting to develop an addictive drug the crime family could sell. Marshall used teenage runaways to test his new drug with lethal consequences. There were no survivors of his experiments until Tyrone and Tandy. They were transformed into superpowered beings and escaped. Tyrone had become a being of darkness and shadow, with a hunger for the light of life forces that Tandy's glowing powers could ease. He hid his strange appearance with a cloak and adopted the name of the garment. Eventually, the pair would use their new abilities to destroy their captors and save other children from crime, drugs, and abuse. At one time, it was believed the designer drug had made their latent mutant genes manifest. Later it was revealed that Despaire's machinations were responsible for Tyrone and Tandy gaining their powers. Tyrone and Tandy remained together for a long time and bonded to an extent that they could not be apart from one another. They both swore to fight crime and put an end to as many drug-related crimes as possible. Because of their mission, they came into contact with other superpowered people such as Spider-Man's WEL's local police chief Bridget O'Reilly. During their time spent together, Spider-Man and Tandy were attracted to one another and Spider-Man thought that Cloak had a bad influence on Tandy. It also seemed that Tyrone had romantic feelings towards Tandy, but these were unanswered from her part. This caused Cloak to become very jealous of Tandy sometimes when she would flirt with Spider-Man or when she got herself a boyfriend. Cloak eventually accepted that Tandy did not love him in the same way he did her. Tandy did however help Cloak on a number of OCAS science since he sometimes felt consumed by his dark powers. It was Tandy that would blast him with her light powers. This eventually became an addiction to Cloak as he kept on feeding of her light powers. Feeling betrayed, Dagger left Cloak for some time, during which time Cloak's dark powers became more and more out of control. For some time, Cloak managed to get his light fix thanks to the mutant known as Dazzler, but her powers could not satisfy Cloak, causing his darkness to grow. The two eventually got back together again as friends after they shared a battle against the evil Mr. Jip. During their times together, they also explored their newfound powers. They apparently lost it on a number of OCAS science, but eventually got them back again too. In time, Cloak and Dagger would grow apart. Cloak got a job running corporate security for a popular musician, while Dagger worked as a consultant for the LA Police Department. They still met up regularly so that Cloak could feed off of Dagger's energy, but their crime-fighting partnership and friendship were both on the rocks. This tension erupted when Dagger began to investigate a series of murders that seemed to be carried out using Cloak's dark force powers. When Dagger confronted him, Cloak was deeply hurt that she'd suspect him of murder. During this time, Cloak felt abandoned by his oldest friend. However, it turned out that Gray, a villain that Cloak believed he had killed, was behind the murders. Gray kidnapped Dagger, and Cloak began to panic. With help from his boss's social media presence, Cloak tracked down Grey and teleported Dagger out of Grey's hideout, although his arm was injured in the escape. Dagger wanted to immediately attack Grey, but Cloak was worried that his partner would be hurt. However, before they could decide what to do, Grey tracked the two of them to Cloak's workplace and used his powers to turn a crowd against them. Cloak and Dagger managed to overcome Grey's tricks, and arrest the killer. The experience strengthened their friendship, and they rekindled their partnership, although Dagger started a relationship with a friend from the police, crushing Cloak's hopes of a romance. Savage Avengers. While patrolling the city, Cloak tried to confess his love for Dagger. This was interrupted by a fight between Conan and a Deathlock unit. They began to intervene, and were joined by Daredevil, Anti-Venom, Black Knight, and Weapon H. However, Deathlock's time travel device activated, and they were all transported to the distant past of Hyperborea. The Deathlock managed to escape the control of his creators, and the heroes banded together as a new team of Avengers. While in Hyperborea, the necromancer Thulsa Doom kidnapped Conan, and planned to sacrifice him to resurrect Set. As the Avengers fought against Doom, Cloak watched as Dagger and Anti-Venom began to express a mutual attraction, frustrating his attempts to explain his feelings. Ultimately, they sealed Set away and defeated Doom, and tried to return to their own time, leaving Conan behind. Instead, the Avengers were taken to the future of 2099, where they were attacked by that time's Punisher because he believed Deathlock to be a villain. After they cleared up the confusion, Punisher explained that his timeline was ruled by an army of Deathlocks led by Ultron. Deathlock's time machine was shorted out, so the heroes were, for the time, stranded. They began to fight back against Ultron, recruiting that time's Doctor Doom. When they attacked Ultron, however, he began to overpower them. Cloak sacrificed his life to prevent Ultron from killing Dagger, using his last words to profess his love to her. She too, however, would die moments later, along with all the Avengers save for Deathlock, Doom, and Punisher. This was not the end for Cloak. Ultron revived the Avengers, using nanotechnology to transform them into horrible cyborg puppets while their minds were trapped in virtual space. Cloak and Dagger were fused into a single cyborg monster with both their power sets. However, Deathlock found the Avengers in cyberspace, where he found them tormented by their fears and neurosis. Cloak was tortured by the fear that Dagger would replace him with Anti-Venom and leave him alone and forgotten. Deathlock reminded Cloak that he was strong on his own as well, as Deathlock convinced each of the Avengers to take back the will to fight. They managed to wrest control of their cyborg bodies away from Ultron, and used his nanotechnology to revert themselves to living organic bodies. The Avengers attacked Ultron in force. As they did, Dagger, remembering Cloak's sacrifice and confession of love, admitted her feelings for him. The two shared a romantic kiss as they dismantled Ultron's cyborg army. Ultimately, the Avengers destroyed Ultron, thanks to the sacrifices of Punisher and Deathlock, and the Avengers were returned to their own time. Cloak and Dagger, for their part, found their partnership strengthened by their fledgling romance. Powers. Cloak's powers derive from his ability to manipulate dark force energy and access the dimension from which it originates. He might actually be made of this negative energy. Dark force energy is perceived by humans as dark matter, either in gas, liquid, or solid form. It is cold, draining, and prolonged exposure can cause insanity, turn one evil, and even kill. Cloak can do the following: create a localized field of impenetrable darkness. Create mobile, solid tendrils of darkness. Hide in shadows. Become intangible, perhaps by changing the solid state of his body into a gas state, perhaps by only partially moving into the dark force dimension. Pull people into the dark force dimension by opening a portal within his cloak. Teleport himself and others by opening a portal into, then out of, the dark force dimension, i.e. taking an interdimensional shortcut. Cloak's powers can be fairly extensive. He managed to temporarily trap Thanos in his cloak. Once, when Jib magically increased his hunger, Cloak's darkness spilled out of him to cover several square blocks of Manhattan. Weakness: Cloak feels a constant hunger which must be fed by a semi-mystical light energy, which is akin to the light of a soul. Dagger is one of the only possible sources of this energy, and she regularly feeds him with her light bolts. Other sources of light don't work. For instance, Dazzler tried to feed him once, using many kinds of light, but it didn't help him. If Cloak is exposed to too much pure light energy, he will revert back into his human form. While in human form he has no access to his powers.